This video scribe is all about driving the implementation of innovation, but through the application of one of my favourite management adages, which is basically what you don't measure, you can't control. And far too many organisations talk about innovation in terms of abstract or aspirational terms with an intent to be innovation, but then don't set any metrics in place to allow you to actually monitor the delivery of that innovation process. And we're going to introduce you to two key performance indicators here. One is the ideation ratio, and the second is the implementation ratio. So let's crack on with these. Now, we're all very familiar by now with the continuous improvement process. If you look at change over time, setting up mechanisms within the organisation to challenge how you do things in terms of incremental improvement, making things slightly better, but doing it on a multiple scale. So if you generate lots and lots of ideas on how to do things slightly better over time, that builds up into quite a sizable change, but always based on broadly how we do things around here. You're just making that world the best world you possibly can. Now, that's not what innovation is about. For us, innovation is about introducing discontinuous improvement or step change. It's not about doing things better, it's about doing things fundamentally differently. And the size of that step change that's determined by the organisation, by the senior team, is effectively the innovation challenge. And that innovation challenge must be calculable in terms of bottom line impact, measured in thousands of pounds, benefit on the bottom line performance of the organisation. Now, once you've set the challenge, that's great, but what that should then do is to unleash a series of creativity sessions. And the effectiveness of those creativity sessions is measured by the ideation ratio. And the ideation ratio is basically the sum total of the potential value of all the creative ideas that have been generated. So if you take any one of those and imagine that it's implemented in full with the desired effect, what's the bottom line impact that each one of those would have? If you then sum across all of those sessions, divide by the total innovation challenge, that will give you the ideation ratio. Now, it's one thing generating the ideas, it's another thing actually doing the implementation side of things. And the implementation ratio starts with the ideation process, if you like. If you take those creative ideas, it's basically looking to measure the sum total of the actual implemented bottom line impact of all those creative ideas divided by the total innovation challenge. So one might imagine that the ideation ratio, ideally you'd want to be well over 100%. If it was less than 100%, then clearly you're not going to deliver the step change that you're looking for. Recognizing that the implementation ratio will probably fall short of the 100% mark, then you might want an ideation ratio that's considerably greater than 100% in order to allow you to guarantee delivery of that step change. Now, let me give you a worked example of this. If you imagine an organisation in which the innovation challenge was to boost bottom line performance, the profits of the organisation by £1 million. That was then split up into the sales team and the operations team, and the sales team, through multiple creativity sessions, generated 3 cracking creative ideas, both novel and useful, that if implemented would give you a bottom line impact of 750k. The operations team, completely separately, ran a series of creativity sessions, and they generated 4 ideas, which if collectively totally implemented would give you a 500k benefit on the bottom line. Now, what that means is that you have an ideation ratio in sales of 75% and an ideation ratio in operations of 50%. Of course, the sum of those two gives you the total ideation ratio, which is now sitting at 125% because it's 1.25 million divided by the total innovation challenge of £1 million. 6 months later, you've gone past the pure ideation phase and you've got an updated ideation ratio because you've been holding further creativity sessions. It's now sitting at 150%. Of those, a number of changes have been implemented driven by the creative process with a collective bottom line impact so far of 100k. Now, compared with a £1 million challenge, that means your implementation ratio is just sitting down at 10%. Now, you can see instantly that this allows you to quantify the implementation of the innovation process. And these two ratios, the ideation ratio and the implementation ratio, should be the key performance indicators that are reviewed on a regular basis by the senior leadership team in the organisation in order to drive the whole innovation process.